Hello, I'm your host, Lindsay Schultz, founder of Feed Your Can, a lifestyle brand that empowers people with food allergies to live fully. You'll learn life hacks and mind snacks so you can thrive each day. You may need to restrict foods, but never the fun. Our kids navigate 8 categories of food allergies altogether. We're learning every day. We refuse to let fear hold us back from living life. We welcome you to Feed Your Can, even when some foods you just can't.
Don't you wish you could skip the awkwardness of going out to eat and talking about your food allergies, but still feel confident that you're going to have a safe meal? That unknown with how the staff is going to respond can make anyone uneasy. It can sometimes feel like you're speaking 2 different languages. And getting on the same page takes a combination of patience, tolerance, teamwork, and honestly, when you're hungry or hangry, that's a really tall order to fill. My conversation today is with Kayla King, and she is a certified nutrition coach and past restaurant manager. Today, she's an entrepreneur who lives with celiac disease, and she has struggled with disordered eating and food anxiety her whole life. But what she teaches us today will give us the right language to understand how the kitchen works, the difference between the line, flat top grill, front of house, back of house, and even some nuanced words where restaurants hear something differently than what we intend to say. It's an episode you'll walk away and say, wow, I need to write these things down. I learned a lot, and my approach will be changing from here on out. But first, a little more about Kayla. She loves traveling and eating out frequently. This foodie can teach us a lot. She now uses all of her knowledge that she has gained over the years about the restaurant industry and her own lived experiences with celiac disease to empower others to eat out through her app MyMeal. And MyMeal is a solution that helps people with food allergies find safe restaurants and menu items to eat. Her vision is transparent eating for all, and she loves to educate others on how to use knowledge as power. Hope you enjoy. Kayla, tell us a little bit about your journey you've experienced and living with this restricted diet.
Yeah, so I got diagnosed with celiac disease when I was 9 years old. And as a kid, it was definitely quite difficult. My parents had to help me through that experience a lot. And I remember when I first got diagnosed, I refused to accept it. I went through the 5 stages of grief and just consumed everything that I could prior to realizing that that was not going to work and that I would have to ultimately cut gluten out of my diet. It was definitely a big learning curve growing up. A lot of times I didn't want to admit that I had it, not until I really grew up and am kind of at the position that I'm at now, where I welcome the community and am highly involved in the community, which has been absolutely amazing because you are surrounded by people that understand you as a human being and understand what you've been through. So prior to that, I kind of wanted to exile that from my life. And so it's been really nice coming to who I am today to be able to be involved in all of that.
And how old were you again?
I was 9.
So you remember a life before those restrictions.
I do. Yes. I do remember vividly when I got diagnosed. I was a competitive dancer at the time. And so in rehearsal, we would bring food. And so right when I got diagnosed, I remember there was a huge box of cupcakes that were brought to our dance studio. And I was like, I'm not going to pay attention to the fact that I just got diagnosed with celiac, and I'm going to eat 7 of these cupcakes. That whole process really, I should have seen that was not okay from a food standpoint and was a sign of overindulgence right away. But we can dive into that a little bit later about how being diagnosed with a restriction does really affect your mental health.
And it probably didn't feel very good either after you.
No, yeah. Not only did I overeat cupcakes because I ate 7 of them, but I also had celiac. So I was getting sick from a gut health perspective. And then also because I was basically trying to overcompensate for the fact that I would not be able to eat gluten for the rest of my life.
And can you explain what celiac disease is for the listeners who are less familiar and how it differs from food allergies?
Absolutely. Celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where the cilia in your small intestine are destroyed basically when you eat or consume gluten. I like to think of it as gluten being the poison or the acid that is consumed when you eat it. And then the cilia, because they're responsible for digesting nutrients, when you kill them off, your body is no longer able to properly digest your food. I call celiac the gateway disease to other diseases because a lot of times if you don't take proper care of your celiac, it can lead to other conditions like diabetes, cancer, blindness. So when people are like, I just don't take care of my celiac, maybe that doesn't have a short-term impact if you're asymptomatic, but it will always have a long-term impact on your health.
I think a lot of times people say, I have a gluten allergy, which is not a thing. You have an allergy to wheat or an allergy to rye or an intolerance to gluten. But celiac being an autoimmune disease is very different. With food allergies, it's an immune system response. With intolerances, it's a digestive gut response. And so sometimes the lines really do blur because GI symptoms can present for all three, but untangling it and figuring out which is really important. So thank you for helping to clarify that.
Absolutely. And just to touch on that really quick, celiac disease, there's over 160 reported symptoms. So it could be anything from anxiety and depression to actually throwing up or having gut distension. There's such a wide range of reactions for celiac disease, and it's important to understand the difference between an allergy, an intolerance, and a disease like celiac, because celiac is having a long-term impact on your gut health. An intolerance is something that comes from the gut and your body just doesn't like. And then an allergy, like you said, is an actual immune response. And so I think the reason that a lot of people think gluten is an allergy is because with restaurants in particular, or when you go out to eat, people understand the severity of an allergy, but they don't understand what gluten is or what celiac is. A lot of times, if you have an intolerance or you have celiac, you're almost forced to say, I have a gluten allergy out of being concerned for your safety. That's really important because you hear like gluten allergy over and over again. And to somebody that doesn't understand these nuances, they think that it is an allergy, when in reality, the reason that people are saying I have a gluten allergy is because that's what most people are accustomed to. And if they hear the word allergy, they're immediately going to take your condition more seriously.
That's really helpful because I do think that from the food allergy community, sometimes we get annoyed by hearing that. But you just helped us reframe it from the perspective of a restaurant team who needs to differentiate the food preparation and take extra precautions. So thank you for that. I'm going to look at it a little bit differently in the future. I think you're a great person who's living out your values of understanding that education can open doors. I see you on Instagram with thousands of followers that you're helping to inspire with different ideas on food and restaurants. You're a passionate foodie and you haven't let this hold you back. And it seems very confusing just to listen for the first time and try and get all these facts straight because it's a learning curve, but you've had to spend the time and really adjust and make those confident asks of a restaurant. It can just really scare people a lot. You've moved through that. Help us understand how you became so confident in going out to eat and experiencing so many different types of cuisines.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate your kind words with that. Eating out has always been a really big passion of mine because ever since I was a little kid, my parents were these people that were like, this isn't going to change your life. Nothing's going to be different. You're just going to go on living your life and you're going to figure it out. So when we would go out to restaurants, I have very vivid memories. At the time, nobody knew what celiac was, right? So 10, 11-year-old little Kayla walks into a restaurant on a road trip and they're like, oh, we don't have anything that you can eat there. And my mom's like, okay, Kayla, this is an opportunity for you to really stand up for yourself. So she was like, I want you to go up and ask for the manager. I was like, I'm so embarrassed. My mom is telling me I need to go do this, so I'm going to go do it. And so I asked for the manager. The manager came out, walked him through this conversation. We were like, hey, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take this chicken breast on the menu that's on this salad. You're going to cook it in a separate pan. You're going to take a baked potato, warm it up in the oven for 10 minutes, slap some sour cream on it, and then that's going to be the meal. And the manager was like, okay, I'll do it myself. I'll go cook it right now. And so the manager did the whole process for us. And it was just because we were very directive with what we needed and not passive. That being ingrained in me as a child has really allowed me to not let celiac limit my life. I will not lie, there has been a lot of mental health challenges that I've gone through with eating out and overindulging, which we briefly touched on earlier. With that said, having the structured confidence to be directive in scenarios and not passive, I think makes a huge difference. A lot of people I see that go out with their food allergy or celiac will just be like, hey, this is what I can't have. Can you make something safe for me? While some restaurants might have the knowledge to be like, yes, this is what we're going to do. These are the safety precautions that we're going to take. You can't expect every entity to know as much about your condition that you do. It's really part of your job to be able to say, hey, here's what I have, here's what I can't have, here's what looks to be safe on the menu. Can you check these 3 ingredient labels? Can you cook it in this way? A lot of times, if you're having that kind of conversation with them, they're way more receptive. And they're like, okay, this is a team effort. We're going to figure it out together, rather than all of the responsibility and weight being on their shoulders, which can be quite difficult for a restaurant that is not educated about it.
Great point. What I like in that too is if you walk into a restaurant and you see the menu of all the different choices, you know that there's only a couple things perhaps that you're really interested in. You can whittle it down pretty quickly. And if you're a caregiver who's working with a child, you also know what they like to eat. So instead of asking what is safe or here are all of the allergies, what can I have? Coming up with the idea first and saying, here are the 2 meals that we're interested in, and we're looking for these specific ingredients. By the way, here's the full disclaimed list because sometimes they do sneak in there. Could you do that specifically? I really like that. We've taken on that strategy ourselves, but I think that what you hit on is learning it and modeling it at an early age, being directive instead of this open-ended question. You tend to be more nervous, and everyone is a little bit more nervous in the beginning, right? But you just taken away the fear and have given a specific task to them.
Exactly. And I think it's important to hold space for how difficult this can be. It was for me. It became very hard getting used to standing up for myself and being super confident. If you're a little bit more passive or introverted, these social situations can be very difficult. And so touching on what I'm trying to create with MyMeal, I kind of go through that process with restaurants. How do you cook it? What are the ingredients that you use in it? All the same questions that I would ask about a dish if I were just ordering it. That said, it allows somebody to look at that information, and instead of thinking through all of the questions that they need to ask, now they just have to say, here's the 2 things you need to do. It's using that approach and allowing people who are maybe more introverted and not wanting to think through and ask and feel like they're interrogating It allows them to just be like, here are the 2 instructions that you need to do. Please go follow them. That is the most effective way to order. It's so much easier said than done.
Okay, talk to us about the solution you've created to help make eating out easier, because you just walked us through your process of what you do. But with all your experience, you've noticed that there is this lack of communication and comfort for people to go dine out. You've really come up with an interesting solution yourself, MyMeal.
Absolutely. MyMeal, in short, is an app for people like us with food allergies and celiac to find safe restaurants and menu items to eat. From a standpoint of finding menu items that are safe, the way we achieve that is through creating a filterable allergy menu for each of our partner restaurants. So you can see what's safe, but in a way that maximizes your options. So it's not just taking out everything from the menu to show you the steamed broccoli that you can have, like your typical Chili's allergy menu. It's going to actually show you what can be modified, what can be safe for cross contact. So we take into account all of the nuances and details to make sure no matter how severe your food restriction is, that you're getting all of the information that you need to make an informed decision about your health. In terms of the process for vetting a restaurant for MyMeal, I take a similar process that you would as an eater. So I find restaurants, whether it be based off of suggestions from other people or from my internet searches. I call them, I vet them, I ask them about their menu, their process, make sure that they have a knack for catering to people with food restrictions. We're going through all of their ingredients. We're going through what goes on every service, because I'm not just asking for one allergy or restriction. I'm asking for 11 to 14 restrictions. So we're taking a little bit of a deeper dive than you would with one allergy. We go through the ingredients, where everything is cooked, what they are willing to do. So like, are they willing to cook it in a separate pan? Are they willing to put down tinfoil on the grill? And we basically package that all into our filterable allergy menu so that you can see not only what's safe for you, but then also exact ordering instructions that you would need to tell them. What's beautiful about it is it's already linked up with what they're able to do. So it's not like you're asking an unreasonable request of them to cook it in a separate pan, because we've essentially already okayed that with the chef. That's something that they're willing to do.
Yep. You talked about a process because you have a lot of practice doing this.
Yes.
How many times a week do you eat out?
I eat out quite a bit. I eat out less now that I live in Oregon. When I was living in Denver, I was probably eating out 3 times a week.
So what is that process you follow?
So there are 4 or 5 steps that I follow. The first thing that's important to know is finding a restaurant. Utilize the resources that everybody else would use. You have Google, Yelp, TripAdvisor, any place where you're normally going to find restaurants. Because allergies are becoming, honestly, more and more common, a lot of times there will be at least 1 or 2 people that have commented on that restaurant's page about food allergies. For me, I type in gluten-free near me or just gluten-free in Yelp. It will pull up all of the places near you where that allergy is mentioned. You can sift through those comments and see if anything's applicable to you. But the reason why I like to start with larger review sites is because they oftentimes are going to have more reliable content. I find sometimes on the allergy sites, they might be a little more biased, or there's not as much information, or it limits your options because there's only a certain amount of restaurants on there. So I think like both can be helpful, but I really like to utilize the larger, more common resources first that everybody else would use. With MyMeal, we're working towards a day where you can see all of the restaurants that are safe and just be able to come onto our website and see all of that information. But right now, when I go out to eat or when I travel across the country or internationally, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to Google, I'm typing in gluten-free near me. Another thing that I try is healthy near me, because oftentimes health food restaurants are going to be more conscious of gluten and allergens. That's how I typically find a restaurant. Part 2 is calling to vet them. Like you said, you want to pick 1 to 2 items to quote unquote test them on. So when I call them, I like to explain hypotheticals. I'm like, hey, I have a gluten allergy. I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about your process. Can you talk about what you guys do to help keep me safe? If they do have a process, that's great. That's a sign that their staff has trained on it. If they don't have a process, you can start to tell what kind of experience you're going to have there. From there, you can double confirm by being like, okay, well, I've looked at your menu. Here are the 2 options that I think to be safe for me. I have a question about cross contact. Do you cook the burgers on the same grill as bread? And you just go through a few hypothetical scenarios to see how they respond. One thing that I should mention is I always ask for the manager or the chef. Don't try and ask the host these questions. They're not going to know. You're just going to be frustrated spending 20 minutes on the phone where they say, oh, let me go ask the chef. I'm not sure. Skip that step and just right when you get on the phone, say, hey, I have a food allergy. I'm trying to learn more about your process. Can I talk to the general manager or the chef? And then when you're actually there ordering, I think it's really important to understand cross contact to figure out what kind of direct questions you need to ask. The most common places where cross contact occur are going to be your grill, flat top, fryer, the line, which I'll explain, and then things like woks and blenders. With the grill and the flat top, most restaurants will cook everything on there. They're probably not going to know if they cook your allergen on there. So if you have a really severe allergy, if you have anaphylaxis, then I would recommend just opting for things to be cooked in a pan or opting for things that are cooked in an oven. Maybe that's a question that you ask when you come in. What on this menu is cooked in a pan? What can you cook in a pan? Just because if they're a breakfast restaurant, for example, everything is going on that flat top. Pancakes, eggs, everything's going on that flat top. Anything that you can point out that is cooked separately in a pan, in a pot, that's going to be probably your safest bet. And then other places, the line, this is one that restaurants don't do. 90% of restaurants make mistakes here. So if you think of Chipotle, this is the best way to describe it, where they have a line of ingredients. Restaurants are going to have one of those in the back of their kitchen. Sometimes they have utensils on all of them, which is best case scenario, but sometimes they're grabbing with their gloves across multiple ingredients. So they could be taking the lettuce and then taking the crouton and then taking the dairy. And that's problematic, right? Because now that dairy is cross contact with the croutons, there's just like a ton of cross contact that can occur during that situation. And when you have an allergy, I will say 9 times out of 10, they do not pay attention to that. They don't take separate ingredients. If you're ordering a salad, a sandwich, anything where they're like building to order, ask that question. Be like, hey, on the line, do you use utensils or do you grab with your glove across multiple ingredients? They'll usually be like, oh, well, we grab with our glove. And then, so your follow-up question would be, okay, can you take separate ingredients from the back that have been untouched so that there's no risk of cross contact? Nuances like that can make a huge difference. And so that's why I think it's important to understand cross contact. And then the fryer, pretty simple. Basically, if it's shared oil, everything's going to go in that oil. A lot of restaurants have a misconception that heat kills an allergen, heat kills gluten. That is not correct. I think it's important to understand why they believe that. It's because cross-contamination is when you have chicken on a cutting board, and now that is cross-contaminated with something that can give you a foodborne illness, that can be killed at high temperatures. And so that is why restaurants think that it can remove allergens, because there is this misconception of cross-contamination and cross-contact being the same thing. As chefs, during Serve Safe and their training courses, they're taught that heat can kill cross-contamination. So when you say, I'm really sensitive to cross-contamination, that's confusing for the chef. The words that are coming out of your mouth are cross-contamination. And the words that are going in their head are, oh, in school where I learned about foodborne illness, heat kills cross-contamination. That's why chefs believe heat kills an allergen. I think there's a lot of fear-mongering on social media of people being like, I can't believe that they believe that. It's honestly a very common mistake from a chef perspective. There's starting to be more awareness about it now, but I think that we can't get upset with them. That's just what they were taught in school. Cross contact is very different, and that's the term to use for allergies. So that cross contact portion is really important to helping you ultimately order, which involves directive questioning that we went through.
Okay, so we've gotten through the first 3 steps, which are vetting a restaurant, calling ahead, and then learning about their cross contact processes in the kitchen. And now we're ready to order. So you talked to us about being very directive instead of passive. Can we play this out a little bit so that we all have a better understanding of how not to be passive?
Absolutely. So I think the best way to do this is just to understand a typical scenario. Lindsay, if you can be the non-knowledgeable server here, I can walk you through what my responses would be to different types of questions.
Okay. Welcome to Lindsay's Everything Grill.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I just want to let you know I do have celiac disease, which is basically similar to a gluten allergy. I'm very, very sensitive and severe. So can we have a conversation about that process?
Sure. I know a little bit about that. I think my friend had that kind of allergy and she would just pick the croutons off her salad. So yeah, we'll make sure that you don't have anything on there.
Okay, so I'm so glad that you're a little bit familiar with it. If I were to pick the croutons off my salad, that would make me really sick. I understand that worked for your friend, but that personally doesn't work for me. I was actually looking at this burger and I see that it comes with cheese and aioli. That all looks to be fine for my celiac, but I was wondering if you put the buns on the same grill top that you grill the hamburgers.
Ooh, I'm not sure.
Okay, is there any way that I could talk to the chef or that you could go ask the chef?
I can see. He looks really busy though. He's pretty busy all the time.
Okay, do you have a general manager around?
Yes, I feel like I've seen her around. Sorry, things are really hectic right now. So let me go and get her. And yeah, I think I can try that.
And so once the general manager comes, you want to ask that same question and be like, hey, do you put the burgers on the grill? If they don't know, be like, I need you to go ask the chef. Just have them ask the chef. Even if the chef is busy, they need to answer that question. If they come back and say, hey, we do put buns on the grill. Okay, could you cook the burger in a separate pan and without a bun, with a side of boiled veggies? If you see veggies on the menu somewhere else in a different dish, they have them. Even if a restaurant is like, oh, well, that's not a part of the menu, you can be like, I see that you have vegetables on your menu, so can you just do a side of veggies, even if you're going to upcharge me? That process gives you a good idea of how to dissect a menu to be in your favor. The one thing that I will say is now that I eat out so often, I don't even go to the server. Immediately when I sit down, I'll be like, hey, is a general manager or chef around? After years and years, it's frustrating. So I sit down and I say, hey, can I talk to the GM or the chef? Or if they're like, oh no, the chef is busy, the GM is going to be available. That's the GM's job, is to talk to customers, be front of house, making the customers happy. Lindsay beautifully demonstrated the typical scenario where a server is just going to be like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think my friend might have had it. That's okay. That server is not trained in it. The restaurant didn't train in it. But a lot of times the managers have to have certain levels of knowledge about food allergies more so than a server. So they're going to be a little bit easier to talk to and have more information about the back of house.
Let me present a twist to this pretend scenario. Let's say you're with a group of your friends. It was a spontaneous decision to go to the restaurant. You are shy and less comfortable with this new group of friends that you don't know so well. So taking up the amount of time in the back and forth feels uncomfortable.
I have a great tip for this. As of recently, I have been dining with a lot of new people since I moved to a new town. I go to the host stand. Can I talk to a chef or a GM? And they're like, oh, they're going to come to your table. And I'm like, no. I would really appreciate it if I could just talk to them here or outside the kitchen because I get really embarrassed talking at the table. And so I'm just like honest with them. A lot of times because they're human, they'll be like, oh, I totally understand that. No worries. I'll bring the chef out. And so I'll have a private conversation with the chef, not at the table, removed. It's easier for the chef a lot of times because you're like right at the kitchen, so they don't have to come all the way out to the dining room. You're getting more accurate information. And so the best story of this, which I love, I was at a ski resort restaurant. It was like a bar and a grill. And I did that when we first came in. Everybody went to go sit down. I came to the host stand, was like, can I talk to the chef at the host stand? The chef came out. We went through what was safe. When the server was taking my order, I was like, hey, I've already talked to the chef. This is what I'm going to order. This is what you're going to tell them. And they were like, and my friend who was also gluten-free, she had ordered something the chef had told me was not safe. And she hadn't eaten it yet, but I was like, don't eat those fries. She was like, why? I was like, the chef just told me that they're coated in a seasoning that has gluten in it. She was like, the server just told me that it was safe. When we came around, it had gotten mentioned to the server because I think I was ordering a burger with fries and I was like, can I not have the fries? Can I have this instead? And he was like, oh, the fries are safe. And I was like, actually, no, they're not. The chef just told me they're not. And he was like, no, they're safe. I don't know what you're talking about. And like literally would refuse to admit that they weren't safe. So much so to the point when we were leaving, I came up to the general manager and I was like, hey, really not trying to make this guy's life miserable. He refuses to admit that these aren't safe. That's a really large health concern. I've talked to the chef. The chef has confirmed that they're not safe. They were like, I'm so sorry. He's new. We're going to educate him and let him know that that's not okay. So I think that's the best situation and where it's always best to go to the direct source of information to understand what's in the food rather than going through the chain of communication because that's how mistakes happen.
Great points. Okay, I like this a lot because you are really getting to the specifics. There is not this generalized conversation happening. I love going to the source. I think that's a great tip. Not to mention the skill practice you get. You just talked about how to be more directive, who to talk to, what specific questions to ask. You were able to skip the server and go right to the chef after enough experience. That skill practice is valuable. We get better every time we do it. If we stumble and if there is a mistake, it doesn't have to be catastrophic if you're prepared with your medication. That's one of many of your tools, right?
Absolutely. Even though it can be frustrating to constantly feel like you're educating others, you are really making a difference. You're making it so the next person can eat out more safely. By staying in your house and not eating out and not doing anything and letting your food restriction define you, you're not only disadvantaging yourself, but you're disadvantaging everybody else who might have learned from you to be able to become better and become more educated about the topic. Servers and chefs are human. While you're having them do something extra, they're receptive if you're kind. And so I think there's this large misconception that you need to be aggressive. There's a big difference between being aggressive and being directive. You can be directive, but also compassionate and kind and understanding. Aggressive is where food allergy community or celiac community gets a bad rap because there are some people that come in and are like almost demanding. So I think showing compassion for the server, showing compassion for the chef is really important. So recognizing, hey, I understand right now this may seem like an inconvenience to you, and I honestly really apologize for that. That's the last intention that I have. All that I'm trying to do is walk out of here safely. I would really appreciate if you worked with me on that. That's the conversation that you want to have. That makes it human for them. I've had that conversation so many times where a manager or server or chef has just been like frustrated with me and been like, sorry, you can't eat here, you can't eat here, you can't eat here. And I'm like, hey, look, we need to have a different conversation right now because all I'm trying to do is make it so I can enjoy this social outing with my friends. I didn't choose this restaurant. I'm not trying to make your life miserable. I'm really just trying to figure out how I can enjoy this social outing with these people that I just met without embarrassing myself. If you bring it back to that human component, a lot of people understand. Like I would say like 99% of people are like, oh, I didn't think about it like that. Or, I'm so sorry. Yeah, let's figure something out. Now you're bringing it back to an emotional component. Hey, I'm a human. You're a human. Let's figure this out as two humans together versus being aggressive and you need to do this for me, because that can honestly come across as entitlement, even though we know it's not entitlement. It can come across to them like that sometimes. I think that's a really important piece to the puzzle to remember.
Yeah. Aggression comes from fear, and it just continues to propagate fear because you're scared of a reaction. They're scared of giving you a reaction and not having all of the full knowledge of safety protocols for food allergies or it happening on their watch.
Right.
You're not solving anything. You're just going back and just stoking the fire and continuing to build more walls.
Right. Yes. Because if you seem on edge, they're going to be more on edge. If you're calm, they're going to be calm. People feed off of each other's energy. As much as we want to say the restaurant should be the one that stays calm because that's their job, it's natural for people to feed off of each other's energy. So if you're hyper nervous about that situation, they're also going to be hyper nervous. And I've been in that situation many times. My boyfriend has been like, hey, you didn't handle that situation well. I got hyper nervous and I got fearful because they weren't answering my questions in the way that I wanted to. I've been like, oh, you're right. I didn't respond in that situation well. And that's probably why they didn't respond in that situation well. If I would have just taken a step back and responded more calmly, I maybe would have gotten a different response from them. I think that's helpful as well to have other people around you that can point that stuff out. And that's how I've become better and more calm in these situations, because he was like, I understand that you were frustrated, but also you could have been much more calm and gotten a different response from them.
Thank you so much. Are there any more steps that we're missing?
No, not really. Dining at a off hour is also really helpful, just as a tip and trick. A lot of times restaurants are going to be far more receptive if they're not busy and running around. So typically a restaurant's busy hour is going to be lunchtime and dinner time around 12 to 2. And then it starts picking back up around like 5 to 9. It is always helpful if you can to dine off at off hours. So if you eat outside of those hours, you're probably going to have a better experience. You're going to be able to talk to the chef more personally. If you're going at like 7 on a Friday or Saturday night to a really popular dinner restaurant, you might have a harder time getting a personal conversation with the chef.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with someone who might be listening and trying to build their own confidence when eating out?
The only thing that's keeping you from eating out is you. I know that may be like a harsh reality, but eating out can be scary. It can be really scary, but there are ways for you to learn how to do it safely. And I know this because I know tons of people with very severe anaphylactic food allergies, multiple of them, that eat out and travel. And they just have tools and resources in their book to be able to do that safely. And I think what's important to understand is even if you're traveling, you don't have to eat out for every meal. You can eat out once a day or once every few days if that's what makes you feel comfortable. Pack food or go to the grocery store or stay in a hotel with a kitchen. There are ways to be able to still live your life despite having this food restriction.
Don't you wish you could just take Kayla with you every time you go out to eat? I learned so much from her. I wanted to recap for you the main takeaways that I had. Here are a few of them. First, when we learn how a restaurant runs, we can bridge that language gap and reduce the risk for error significantly. Kayla taught us to be directive, not passive. That doesn't mean being aggressive. You can still be kind and compassionate. If we stay calm, they'll stay calm. If we act scared, they might respond with a little bit more defensiveness. If we have structured communication with specific questions and instructions on how to help cook our meal, then we can work together and remove that element of fear. She also taught us that we can do our research ahead of time by looking up the restaurant to make sure they can accommodate allergies, and then vet them by calling and asking what their allergy practices are for safety. When we get to the restaurant itself, hopefully at odd dining hours and not at the busiest time. Don't forget to bring your allergy card if you have one, because this is an awesome tool that's the size of a credit card and it can be printed in multiple languages. Now we're at the restaurant. Okay, remember, right at the host stand is where you're going to ask for the manager or the chef, because you're going to try and understand from the very beginning which 2 or 3 items from the menu you've picked out are safe, even before you talk to a server. Let's ask for the chef or the manager. We're going to have a very specific talk track. Here are my allergens. I've looked at the menu, and these are the choices I'm interested in. Can you check that these ingredients are safe based on the allergies I told you? And are you able to cook the food in this way, whether it be in an oven, on a separate pan, or if it's on the flat top grill, perhaps it's in tinfoil? Having that clear conversation on cross-contact is important because we learned that it's not cross-contamination. Remember, high heat kills bacteria for foodborne illnesses. That's what chefs were taught. But what we want to know is where those allergens are coming in contact in the kitchen. It's not enough to have somebody change their gloves. We want to make sure we are getting ingredients that have not come in contact with our allergens. And there is a way to ask and still make it a team effort. These skills will take practice, and it's okay to fumble. Just always have your medicine with you. Kayla talked a lot about MyMeal, which is her new app. And if you want to follow her on Instagram, it's mymeal.foodallergy. That's her Instagram handle. Or if you want to download the app itself, you can find it directly on the website, findmymeal.io. And that gives you an opportunity to also sign up for the wait list so that you can see when MyMeal is coming to a city near you.
Thanks for listening, and remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and leave a review. You can also visit feedyourcan.com to grab a freebie or subscribe to our newsletter. Remember, feed your can, because some foods you just can't.